if I had one spey casting tip, it would be to keep your eye on your anchor. I'd call it the anchor, the golf ball, or the baseball. So where your line is anchored to the water, if you watch that, it'll tell you everything you need to know about the cast, from the timing to the direction to anything else. So um, don't watch your target or anything. Keep your eye on the line that's on the water there.
That was Zack Williams sharing his best tip for spey casting, one of the best in spey today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. Zack Williams, the editor of Swing the Fly magazine, is on to share some of his best tips on spey and the Clearwater River. We find out about some of the misnomers in spey, talk about who the Michael Jordan of spey is right now, and discuss the best rods and lines for the long game. Please share this episode if you get a chance with one other person today, if it's providing any value for you. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Since 1977, the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal has long been considered the angler's magazine, with original how-tos and technical articles written by the best trout and steelhead anglers in the West. They are committed to sharing exceptionally written essays, fiction, poetry, and in-depth guides to fly tying and fly fishing. FTJ is one of my go-to magazines, and if you haven't checked it out recently, you can get started today by calling 1-800-541-9498 or heading over to the web at ftjangler.com. GotFishing.com is your trusted source of information with access to the world's best fishing trips. You'll never pay a dime extra for the trip you book, and in many cases, less than advertised. Find out where Got Fishing could take you by heading over to GotFishing.com today. That's GOTFishing.com, or reach them by phone at 208-630-3373. GotFishing.com, the easiest place to start your next fishing adventure. Here's Zack Williams from swingthefly.com. How's it going, Zack?
Good. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. It's been it seems like a long while coming here because as I connect to more people out there, Swing the Fly, Wet Fly Swing. There's a few Brads out there that have the swing in the name, so it's good to connect with you here and talk about swinging. Maybe before we get into the magazine and all that, can you just talk about how you first got into fly fishing, and then maybe you could bring it up to how the magazine started?
Yeah, sure. Try not to be too long-winded with it.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I grew up in Michigan, so Great Lakes fishing, and was just fortunate to have a father who loved to fish and took me everywhere with him. So I started fly fishing, both fly and conventional, really young. I've got a picture of myself in diapers with a fly rod with my dad kind of going through the motions, casting with me. So, when my first memory of fly fishing was, I think I was like 5, fishing a little neighborhood pond for bluegill. And when I was about 8, I decided I wanted to catch a trout on a fly, and flailed away for a whole summer before accomplishing that, but did catch one. And then I, through all that, I was gear fishing too. Primarily, we had a smallmouth river 5 minutes from the house, and we would go just cast crankbaits for smallmouth and stuff like that. But when I was about 12-ish, I decided that I wanted to catch a steelhead on a fly rod. And so I got a 7-weight for Christmas and got really into it, and then started, fishing the smallmouth with the fly as well, and all of that. Kept conventional fishing as well, on up through that, but just became more and more of a passion, and all through there. So all through high school and college.
Did you ever take any breaks along the way in between that 12-year-old and now?
Not a lot. No.
Yeah.
No, I played basketball and golf in high school, and that certainly took up some of the time, and but ended up quitting those before my senior year because I wanted to fish more,
Yeah.
and then through college kept fishing a lot. Got into all the stuff that college kids do, and hanging out with friends and drinking and stuff, but still fished quite a bit, still managed to get out there, and was regularly fishing, and by then I'd bought a Spey rod and was doing that as well. So
Nice. So the basketball thing, that's something we have in common. Basketball was one of my big sport in high school. It's interesting. You quit your junior year. I wanted to touch on that just briefly. Because I think of myself, it would have been crazy for me to think of quitting basketball and kind of for fishing. What was that like, and why did you quit hoops? Why'd you feel you had to quit basketball for fishing?
it's a big regret of mine, actually, but I quit after my sophomore year. So, I was playing JV. We were a really good team. And my junior year, honestly, I probably wouldn't have made the varsity team.
Yep.
We went, I think we finished third in the state. We lost like on a buzzer beater in the semis to go to the state championship. And fairly big school, division and everything.
What was the high school that you went to?
Forest Hill Central in Ada, Michigan. But a bunch of the kids from that team went on to play even D1 basketball and professional in Europe. And one of my teammates went on and played at Wake Forest with Chris Paul and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, like really good team. So anyways, I didn't try out. I'd started working in a little fishing and outdoor store, Gander Mountain, Eastern chain. That I think is since out of business or changed, but I didn't want to lose my job in the fishing department and stuff like that. So I didn't try out junior year, and then senior year I tried out, and the coach was kind of like, well, we could probably offer you a spot on the team, but you wouldn't play a lot. And so I was like, you know what, you should give it to a junior who will get the experience for your team next year, and I'll just keep doing my thing. So
there you go.
I faded out from it, but I miss basketball.
Do you still play at all?
Yeah, I haven't played. We moved last year, and right. I haven't played a lot since I moved. I was living before this. I'm in Missoula now, but I was living in Pullman, Washington, where Washington State University is, and me and a buddy were going and playing with the college kids, which was fun. Certainly to keep you in shape and stuff. So we would go to the rec center and play against them, be the old guys. So that was fun.
That's right. You're bringing back some memories of myself back in the college days. Yeah, I was out playing with some. It was funny because I was out just this weekend playing with some kids on our in our neighborhood. Right, these kids are they're like the neighbor kids. I don't know how old they are. They're probably. I don't even know, maybe high school, maybe sophomores. It's funny. Obviously, You got the man strength, so the kids can't come close to you. But man, I'll tell you what, the quickness thing, right? That's the one thing that's tough because you know what I mean. You always had that but when you get to I'm in my 40s now, so it's like, oh man, I don't have. They can beat me right on the quick thing. It's tough.
Yeah, it's different. I enjoy that. Being older now, I think you have a better grasp on the mental side and the strength typically, but I like trying to beat them with the mental game now,
Exactly.
Since you're going to be outclassed athletically.
That's right. That's right. Cool. Well, we definitely could chat about basketball, the whole thing here, but people would get mad if I didn't dig it a little more on, the swinging and some of that stuff. But so you've been, fly fishing has been your life. How did you come up to the magazine? How did that start?
I guess there's 2010 2010, I moved from Michigan to Washington chasing steelhead, and started guiding shortly after. So kind of just following the steelhead fly fishing as a life. And I got an idea for the magazine somewhere, I don't know, 2011, 2012. And it was really, the motivation was just seeing and knowing a bunch of really neat people in the steelhead fly fishing world, and knowing that they had a lot of stories to tell and a lot of knowledge to share. And Facebook was kind of getting big with people at the time, and like there was a lot of like just beautiful photos and stories getting shared on social media or on some obscure blog, and then lost forever. And I was like, somebody's got to put this on paper or in a longer lasting form. So it started with seeing a lot of the work from a lot of these people, and just wanting to share it. So
that's it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so in 2012, you had the idea for the magazine. What were the other big magazines that were out there? I guess that's the first question. What were the other big magazines that were out there then? And also, why magazine versus, say, writing a book or starting a podcast or anything else you could have done?
I don't know, lack of a better idea at the time.
Yeah.
I was, as a kid, getting into steelhead fly fishing. There was a couple of things that were really influential for me, and one was Trey Combs' steelhead fly fishing, and the other was Tom Parrow's Wild Salmon and Steelhead magazine. And after that went away, I know myself and a lot of other people really missed it, and so that was a big influence on wanting to start something. And Tom was incredibly helpful in getting it off the ground. And so
that's
cool. that was it. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. You mentioned two people. I've interviewed both of them. I'll put links to the show notes, Tom Parrow and Trey. So there you go. So there's two pretty big mentors for you. I mean, anybody else, I guess, right now you're a huge mentor for a lot of people. I talked to a number of people before we did this episode, and they said you're the go-to resource for them when it comes to Spey and I guess the voice of Spey, right? I mean, can you talk about that maybe first of all? Who are a few of your other mentors, or who influenced you in the magazine, and then talk about how you think of yourself as a mentor?
I don't know about the latter part, but the former, there were so many people who got this thing off the ground just with their generosity. Marty and Mia Sheppard were huge in it. Rick Kustich in the Great Lakes. When I started it, I wanted to make sure I had it wasn't just Northwest focused. And so I reached out to Rick, and he's been with me since the start, and Marty and Mia. I mean, it never would have got off the ground without them.
Yep.
And, there's too many to list. Jonathan Barlow, up in BC, his photography, and the very first issue I interviewed steelhead fly fishing legend Mike Kinney. He's been a huge help as well. And as an angler, he was certainly one of the most influential on how I looked at steelhead fly fishing, other than Trey. And Mike's in Trey's book as well. So he took the steelhead fly fishing and the knowledge game to a whole new level to me. So it's a guy that I think doesn't get as much credit as he's due for that. So and his photography, I don't know if you've seen it, is unworldly. It's more a lot of landscape and wildlife these days as opposed to fishing, but his photography is incredible.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, I'll try to look up something and maybe put a link to some of his stuff in the show notes. Well, let's, the magazine itself, maybe you can just start off describing, kind of for somebody who hasn't read it or, seen it, what it's all about.
Yeah, it's all about swinging flies, primarily with the two-hand rod, but certainly includes some single-hander stuff as well. But it's, the history, the art, but also technique, and there's a lot of fly tying, and try to cover a wide geographic area as well. So I have kind of a core team these days that includes Rick Kustich in the Great Lake, really well-known Atlantic salmon guy, Topher Browne, Sean Dahlquist up in Northwest Washington on the Olympic Peninsula, really well-known for his fly tying, and Steve Bird, who I know you had on the show. Yeah, so I've got Travis Johnson doing casting advice, short casting column. So,
nice.
Arguably one of the top couple Spey casters in the world doing that. So they form kind of my core team, and then have other content from people all over the place. A lot of regulars, and some that come in for just an issue or two, and try to mix things up, do things a little different. I do a lot of big spread photography and try to let the imagery speak to people, which is something you probably don't see in a lot of magazines. And it's all printed on recycled paper, which is something that's been a challenge, but I'm proud of. When 100% recycled paper is pretty hard to come by. But when I first kind of had this idea for the magazine, I'd been a guide out on the Olympic Peninsula, and as you know, it's easy to see the detriments of logging to steelhead. And it's not that I don't use non-recycled paper for anything, but I felt kind of like it would be a bit of a hypocrisy to be talking about the effects of logging on steelhead populations and stuff like that in a magazine that was potentially coming from trees cut down on the banks of struggling steelhead rivers. So we tried to do it a little differently with that, and so
there you go. There you go. So I've had a number of editors of different magazines and things like that over the years, and I know you talk about you as the editor, maybe that's one of your things you're not that's not what your career hasn't been set around editing. Can you talk about maybe your style as an editor and how you because I know like John Shewey was on way back, and he noted that sometimes he gets some stuff that's really he can get stuff that's not great, right? And the editor is the person who brings it, maybe fixes it, brings it to life. How do you deal with that, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm a work in progress myself. It is only hinted at a little bit, but I started the magazine with just the idea that somebody needed to do it, and I'm not a professionally trained editor, so it's been a work in progress and learning along the way. And I, as an editor, I try not to change people's voice. So I probably at times have not been even as heavy-handed as I should be. But I want to let people come through authentically, rather than it being what they want to say, but in my words.
Yeah.
So, and part of that too is just a lack of my own ability, especially in the beginning. So I'd like to think I'm a lot better at it now than I was then, but it's still a work in progress. I'll be honest, it's always been a struggle as well, just in that it's, the money to make Swing the Fly go is tight. So there's a lot, there's not a lot of eyes on the end product as opposed to when you look at a big publication. So that makes it difficult as well. But we do the best we can and just try to portray the sport in a positive manner. And hopefully, if I screw up from time to time as an editor, people will forgive me for that.
How much time, if you look at it on a weekly basis or a month, however you want to do it, does it take you to put it all together?
Oh, in the beginning, it was very much a full-time job. As it went down the road, I've taken a full-time job as an editor for another publication now. So Swing the Flies become more part-time in the last year in particular. So in the beginning, I blended it with guiding, but I was never a year-round guide. I'd guide fall steelhead on the Clearwater and the Grand Ronde and do the Olympic Peninsula for a while. And then it was Swing the Fly all the time in between. Now that I've stepped away from guiding and taken a full-time job, it gets hard to find the hours to put the product out there and continue to keep the quality up, but doing the best I can.
Mm-hmm. And is it a quarterly magazine?
Yeah, it sure is.
So quarterly. So you might have a time where you're getting it ready, or maybe you could talk about that, the process, just quickly, how that works.
Yeah. I mean, everything's condensed a bit now because of the full-time job, but it's always been like, there's a lot of upkeep and really what's sacrificed now that I have another job is, the maintenance of the website, stuff like that, honestly. But the magazine itself, there's a lot of coordinating and back and forth and arranging content in the in-between months. And then there's about a month of crunch on it where copy editing, gathering all the imagery, stuff like that, and then building it into the layout and reviewing that. So 3-4 weeks of pretty intensive work on that part.
Yep, gotcha.
So yeah, little breaks in there, but no, it's pretty consuming. So
perfect. Well, I want to get into a few, maybe some of the, the articles, tips, and things like that in a sec. I just had one more thought on that. You mentioned Tom Bai in the magazine that he had that's gone away. I mean, do you see yourself? I mean, now I guess it's early on, but do you see this magazine going on for a long time, or do you see maybe an end in its life cycle like you saw with Tom's magazine?
I'd like to think that it'll continue for as long as the reader wants it. And that, the readers and the writers still seem interested and the readers still seem interested right now. So it continues. It's very possible that the format will continue to evolve and change as the industry does. So we'll see where it goes from here. But I don't see Swing the Fly like disappearing completely or anything like that anytime soon.
Yep.
But it's a tough business, magazines are a tough go. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. It seems like there's only a few out there where the editors are, I don't know if there's, who the full-time people are, but, just like Tom Bai and, I mean, some of the big magazines, I mean, those guys are doing stuff on the side as well. It seems like there's not, I mean, are there any magazines where the editors are kind of full-time?
Well, you just mentioned Tom. I would think Tom was, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure, but I mean, that certainly was my hope at one point in time with Swing the Fly. It's just not really feasible at this time, and especially the swung fly niche of our fly fishing
Yeah.
niche is so small.
Is it? How small is it? If you just had to get like percentage wise to make a guess,
The
overall,
percentage of fly fishing that
like
swing a fly?
yeah, say in North America, say in North, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, 1%.
Oh, really? You think it's that small? So it's not like 20%.
Yeah, I don't know. What's your guess?
Yeah, I would, yeah, I mean, it's definitely small, but yeah, because swing, I mean, you got it, you got dries, you got swinging, I mean, because you kind of have the, streamers, which is getting bigger, and you can kind of throw swinging into some of that too, I guess. And, I might guess more like 10%, 5 or
Yeah.
10%, but I mean, it is kind of an older school thing that maybe feels like it's getting more traction again.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that. When I say 1%, you look at fly fishing as a whole, so many of the people are who would be included in the entire fly fishing statistic, I think, are one trip a year. They
Yeah,
out here to Montana
that's
and
right.
have a guide for 3 or 4 days or a week, and that's their fly fishing trip of the year. And so if you think that, I don't know, 70% of fly fishermen would be in that category, 30% are regulars and avid, that's where I would then say, only 1% swing a fly. If you look at really truly avid fly fishermen these days who are getting out there weekly or more, I think that swung fly percentage would increase and is growing. Among avid anglers, it certainly seems to be growing in interest. And
There
with
you
the
go.
trout spey rods now, I mean, obviously the swung wet fly is a very traditional, old school tactic, but the spey casting things probably brought a little bit of new life
Mm-hmm.
into that, especially with trout. And so, yeah, no, I think it's growing in that regard. And
Yep. Yep. No, yeah, it's interesting. We've talked. I have another podcast that's focused on a little bit more of the online marketing side of things, and I've had some guests on there that have talked about niching down and the importance of niching down, right, when you're starting out in your thing. And I mean, you're in an
mhm,
ultra. We talked about this too, right? The ultra niche. I mean, you are in swinging.
yeah,
You're in a super tiny niche, which makes sense why it would be a little bit harder to, to build a full time thing out of it because it's a tiny niche. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of those things is that you're kind of where you are. I mean, do you see the magazine evolving out of, I think of myself, right? Wet Fly Swing, that came to me because I love the traditional style and it was a throwback to that. But now I'm broadened out into all of fly fishing, right?
yeah.
Do you see the magazine evolving out of the from where it is?
No,
Yeah,
no. I mean, it was I started it as a tribute to this niche, and so no, it'll always be the swung fly niche. I mean, I'll publish the odd article that's kind of borderline what we traditionally think of.
what's the order? What's the odd article that maybe what comes to mind you've published that's kind of maybe not quite.
Well, I've done some short pieces like tarpon on a two-hander, stuff like that. You're not your traditional swung fly per se, but and I like including that stuff, but beyond that, it stays in that realm. And Steve Bird, like the upcoming issue, his article is about a fishing trip, but it's not really a fishing trip, and so I like having the creativity in there too.
Gotcha.
So
How do you balance some? And we're going to get in, like I said, we're going to get into some tips and stuff in a bit. But these are interesting questions for me because they've come up on this podcast before with some guests. But like the politics, I don't want to get into a politics, episode or anything like that. But I'm curious how you balance the politics. I know, like Steve Bird, I've had him on. We didn't talk a lot about politics, but I was on a a trip with somebody who knew Steve, and he mentioned that Steve, it was pretty political on his, on his side or whatever, and to a point where it, rubbed him the wrong way. I think they were maybe a little more conservative. But what's your take on politics, and how do you balance that in the magazine if that comes up?
Politics for me is where swing fly is a pro wild fish. I'm not going to get outside of the fishing realm with the politics in Swing the Fly, but we're a pro wild fish magazine, and we've done a lot of work with Native Fish Society, Wild Steelhead Coalition, Wild Steelheaders United, Atlantic Salmon Federation. So we're going to align with them on the issues, and try to speak for wild fish. So I've been with Swing the Fly. It's a unique position for me as the editor and publisher in that there's not really any check on me. So honestly, I can I can write what I want politically, or include whatever else politically. But to me it's not that controversial among our niche. I mean, if you're a steelhead angler right now and you're not concerned about wild fish, you probably should be questioning why you're fishing and if you should be fishing, because we have a lot of things to be concerned about these days. So I think my politics on it is it's not okay to not care. We can differ in opinion, but you better care about wild fish.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And do you guys have typically a conservation piece or a writer who touches on that?
Typically I work with those organizations and give them the space to share issues they're working on.
Yeah.
So that's how we include a strong conservation element in it. Is I give them the space to talk about what they need to talk about and spread the word.
Perfect. So maybe you could talk. I know the Clearwater you've covered, and you've been all over the Northwest and the Midwest. But what is your home river if you think of swinging flies? If you just had to say, and I know you've moved recently, but what is your home river right now?
I'd call the Clearwater River my home river. So it's still the closest river to me. I'm now in Missoula, but the Clearwater was where I really made my stay guiding, and although I'm not guiding there anymore and the fishery's in a lot of trouble, it's my home place.
Yep. Yeah. Yep, it's Clearwater. Okay, and is that just for trout, or are you also, just for steelhead, but are you also swinging for other species, trout or whatever?
The Clearwater was a steelhead fishery to me. There's a small stretch of smallmouth bass in there, and the tributaries are world-class cutthroat rivers, which I've spent a lot of time on. But the Clearwater itself, the Middle Fork and Main Stem are steelhead rivers.
That's it. And that's mainly because I know I've heard you're kind of more of you've been kind of a big fish guy, right? You like going for the big fish. How is that, with Montana now? Are you, it sounds like maybe you're doing some swinging there too, the trout space stuff. How does it compare to steelheading in some of think of your greatest moment steelhead fishing versus your greatest moment swinging flies in Montana?
Oh yeah. I love swinging a fly for trout. For one, I can still find some solitude doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if the pure excitement equals out on a fish by fish basis, but you can, get a lot more action in a day typically and have some really nice time on the water. So I love the trout spey. I've been fortunate to swing a fly for a lot of steelhead for quite a few years between the Great Lakes and out here. So time for me to give the fish a break more than anything. But yeah, seeing a steelhead come up to a dry fly in particular, there's a few things like that, and grabbing onto the tail of a Olympic Peninsula steelhead with sea lice hanging off it. I can't
Yep.
say that a 18-inch trout is the same as that.
Right.
So you remember the steelhead for a lot longer, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. You got, yeah, it sounds like, yeah, there's just no comparison for this steel. And I think a lot of the steelheaders, I don't know exactly if it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but I think a lot of us have the same feeling, when it comes to that. It's hard to compare anything else. And, I haven't been around the world, I haven't fished for everything, but I mean, when you compare it to some of the other species, is that kind of how you feel too?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of salt water. I've covered most things here in freshwater, but saltwater certainly intrigues me a lot. But yeah, steelhead, Atlantic salmon, I think the little bit I've done of that. Yep. Those fish in terms of freshwater are the apex to me. But there's a lot of, the cool thing about fly fishing is each fish species is, the experience is so different. So, the fish, the steelhead, the Atlantic salmon, and that individual fish, there might be no match for that. But, going out and catching bass on top water or,
Yep.
swinging a mouse fly at night in the Great Lakes for big brown trout. I mean, there's cool things that the excitement is different, but really awesome. Not to be discounted either. So that's cool. It's a cool thing in fly fishing. If you get tired of one fish or doing one thing, you can change it up a little bit and go do something else and still fly fishing, but it's so different that the things you enjoy about it are completely fresh and new. So
exactly. Yeah, that's a good take on. Well, I want to start us off with a few of the questions here. And I want to start off with Tim, who I know Tim Rollins, Line Speed Jet. I told him I was going to give him a shout out on here because he's he's the man. I love Tim. I asked him, what question? Yeah, Tim. I mean, where did you first connect with? Have you known Tim a little while?
Only a couple years, I think, in person. I forget. I think it was just that he showed up at the Clearwater Spey Clave, the Red Shed Spey Clave, a couple years ago, and we got chatting, him, myself, Bruce Cruck, about casting. And I'm a casting nerd too, and just love the intricacies of the Spey cast, and Tim's enthusiasm for it is infectious. So
yeah,
he's a cool dude. So.
And now a quick word from our sponsors. GotFishing.com, a boutique booking agency for fishing adventures around the world. Got Fishing is unique in working with a small hand-selected group of outfitters from around the world that are known for providing an experience that is second to none. Got Fishing can be your trusted source of information with access to the world's best fishing trips. Their sole purpose is to help you plan the most authentic fishing adventure while making sure it fits within your budget. The beauty is that everything they do is 100% free. You will never pay a dime extra for your trip, and in many cases, less than advertised. I can attest personally to the service that Got Fishing provides, as they have been working with me closely to set my first trip to the Yucatan for saltwater. They have taken care of all the important details and allowed me to avoid worrying about any of the complications. I know Brian and the crew have you covered at Got Fishing. Whether you need a fishing consultant, travel consultant, gear pro, or the like, they have you covered. With top-of-the-line outfitters they represent around the world, they are confident they have just the right trip for you. You can give them a call at 208-630-3373 or head over to gotfishing.com to get started today. Let Got Fishing help you plan the fishing trip you've been dreaming about. I forget that in the center are rivers and fish unspoken for, that there are valleys, the strata of which we lower into perhaps in the hollow between breaths. In the tiny pause between the rise of summer and its departure, I nearly forget the long sieve of winter, the absence, the fractional glimpses of light. Dear one, I will go without speaking. Ablaze, keep me until I disappear. That was a poem by Molly Dam in the summer edition of the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal. On top of some great poetry, as you hear here, FTJ is jam-packed with another round of great articles in diverse departments. Joseph Rosano is back again, provides another classic steelhead lesson for everyone. We hear from Garrett Lesko in a stacking deer hair frenzy. Find out about striped bass from Angelo Peloso. And hear from Dave McNeese on singing the blues of material dying. Lots of additional articles in the summer edition, including an editor's interview with yours truly about how I became a fly fishing podcaster. Craig did a really good job with this one, so I'm pretty proud to be in this edition. I believe I have found the perfect sponsor for the show. It would be really great if you can support FTJ by heading over to ftjangler.com and subscribing so you don't miss any of the tips, tricks, and stories in the next issue. That's ftjangler.com to get started today. And tell Craig and the crew out there you heard about the magazine from the podcast, and I'll find a way to put something extra special together for you. Okay, back to the show. What would be a more interesting topic for you to talk about if we had, another 30 minutes here? The casting, the Spey cast, tips on talking about that, or more of swinging a fly, tips on swinging a fly?
I like both of them a lot. I can geek out on either one.
Okay.
So.
Okay, good. I was struggling with that. I tried to come up with kind of an arc or a headline for, I try to focus it a little bit just because I think it helps guide the conversation. And so I think I kind of land on Spey because it's been such a struggle for me, like I think a lot of people over the years. And I guess maybe let me start off first again with another question for you. Did you teach yourself? Did you ever have any lessons? Did you ever pay anybody for a casting lesson? What's that all look like?
I never paid anybody for a casting lesson. I've been fortunate to get some help. I would highly recommend paying for a casting lesson. So don't follow the way I did it. It was a long process. I started out when I was like 16 years old. I bought my first Spey rod, and it was a long process to even achieve like basic proficiency.
What was it? Yeah. What was the rod?
It was a St. Croix Imperial.
Oh yeah.
I mentioned earlier in the conversation, but I was working in this little sporting goods store called Gander Mountain, and we were a St. Croix dealer. St. Croix is based in the Midwest. And there weren't, even in 2000, there weren't a lot of rods on the market. Sage was obviously doing it and some other ones, but St. Croix came out with this Imperial, and the retail cost was $250. And we got a pro deal, so I paid $92 for my first Spey rod, brand new. So, but I had all I had was this. It was I VHS recorded from Saturday morning a Fly Fish America episode, and they were the guy. I think his name was Mike, and maybe you remember his last name, who was the host. But he was on the Skagit with Trey Combs and Scott O'Donnell, and they were Spey casting, and they had there was like one clip of Scott doing a double Spey, and I rewound that little like 7 seconds, I don't know, 1,000 times to figure out how to do this double Spey, and got where I could get the line out there. But it was a long process. Whenever it was that Simon Gosworth's Rio, the multi-disc DVD came out.
That's huge.
That brought me leaps and bounds within a few days of having that DVD. And then beyond that, it was just, it was a process. And when I became a guide, I had this just kind of one of my childhood friends' dads, nothing to do with fishing, not an angler or anything. But out of college, I started working for him, and he knew I wasn't going to stick around and work for long. And he just gave me the advice one day. He said, kind of fatherly, he said, whatever you choose to do in life, just try to be the best at it, which sounds obvious and stuff. But he's like, and if you can't be the best, be the second best. And, so when I became a guide, I decided with spey casting that, I'm going to try to be the best I can be as a caster and a guide. Just because I wanted to be good at what I chose to do in life. So, I put a lot of time into spey casting.
You did.
And just a lot of repetition, including just practicing, not fishing. So, I think your average angler probably doesn't practice aside from their fishing. They show up at the river and go fishing.
Yep.
And I put a lot of time into just casting.
That's it.
So
that's actually a great tip for anybody listening that's probably struggling, is that you need to practice like anything. On the guiding thing, so I'm not sure how long you guided, but guiding, and I've had lots of guides on here, people that have done it their whole lives, people that haven't. Why didn't you stick with guiding?
Several reasons, I guess. One, continued to see the fisheries that I was working on struggling, and I no longer felt good about what I felt was, taking from that resource for my own benefit, and continuing to watch them struggle. So that was probably the biggest reason. But secondary was, I'm married. My wife was in a job that was really stressful and stuff. Guiding is a tough way to really support a family. And it was time to step up. And
yep.
So I made the decision to make a change, get a career that maybe even involved some health insurance and stuff like that. So that's where we're at now. There's plenty of things I miss about guiding. Being on the water every day is something that's hard to match.
Totally.
Like just being outside and rowing a boat. I never would have thought I'd just miss like the act of rowing a boat so much. And then the friendships you develop over the years of guiding. So many of my clients I'd been guiding for quite a few years, and are good friends. And so miss doing that. But there's pros and cons to it all. So
for sure. Well, let's get back to Tim. Tim had a couple questions here for you, and one of them was he was curious about myths with spey casting on the technique. Can you talk? Are there what myths are out there that are, I don't know, anything you could speak of there when people are, trying to become a proficient spey caster?
Yeah, my biggest thing I've preached when I write about spey casting or talk at events has been the concept of the anchoring the fly line on the water in a spey cast. And I've always talked about how that is the most critical component of the cast. So I guess, I've been fairly critical at times of spey casting instruction being too focused on body mechanics, and you have to do it my way. Like you have to move your arms in this way or that way. My goal has always been to get to what the essence of what makes the cast go. And I've talked about golf a lot, and being that you like other sports as well, you look at golf, everybody swings a golf club in a different manner. Everybody shoots a basketball in a different manner. So, to me, the idea that, I've got to move my arms this way or that way just didn't hold up as the essence of what makes the spey cast work. So,
gotcha.
So that's what I've always been. And Tim and I guess if he wants to get more into more detail on there's a concept of the V loop that's been touted in spey casting, like energizing the fly line on your back cast essentially. Yep. And to me, that's never held up, never had merit in the cast. So I've tried to dispel that a little bit.
And you're talking about You're talking about like a V loop versus just a D loop?
Correct. Yeah.
And the thought is that if you have more of a V-shaped loop, that you're going to have more power or be able to cast further?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it's never held up. It's probably easier to demonstrate and explain over the phone, but it's never
Mm-hmm.
held up to me. So you get people really like speeding up their whole casting
Oh,
stroke to
right.
try to achieve this V. It was energize your D loop, energize the fly line. So you start speeding up all this stuff and everything else falls apart. And
Exactly.
so my casting philosophy has been to summarize very simply, eliminate as many variables as possible.
Yep.
So you want to move the rod in the same manner, at the same speed and tempo for as long as absolutely possible in the cast. And so when you start speeding up this, trying to create this magical V loop, you have introduced a new variable that then needs to be adjusted for when you go forward into a forward cast.
Yeah.
So you're making consistency very difficult to achieve. Whereas I think if you I mentioned, how much I practice casting. When I was doing this, I would practice, like, I break like the basic spey cast, like a double spey, into 3 steps, right? You set the anchor, and I would practice that one step and try to get as consistent as possible with that. And when you're consistent with that, you've eliminated variables. If that line is landing in a different spot every cast, that's a variable that then is going to affect the next step. And so I tried to get consistent with that step, and then I moved to the next step, and I tried to get consistent with that. And it's a little methodical and maybe borderline boring to some people, but through getting consistent with each step, you're eliminating variables until you get down to the very last instant of the cast, and everything is consistent over and over. And then on the forward cast, you can create distance. Once you understand all those other things, you can give it a nice soft little forward cast, just like you would do with a little trout rod.
Yep.
And a 20-foot cast with the dry fly, the spey cast. You only want it to go 30 feet. You give it just a nice little forward cast, and if you want it to go a little further, you're going to accelerate just a little bit more at the last instant. And so just consistency has always been the goal with all of that. And then, the distance part is something that's a whole nother topic. But
Right.
I think as an angler, as a spey angler, if you want to be an effective angler, consistency is going to be far more important than the distance. And you need to be consistent. You need to be able to cast. You need to cast off of each shoulder on each side of the river. So no matter the wind direction or obstacle, you always have a cast that'll work. And if you can cast a modest 60 feet off of each shoulder, each side of the river at a consistent angle, and turn the fly over consistently, you're going to do really well as an angler.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're chasing all these like magical things that'll make the fly go farther, and one cast works and the next 3 fail, you're really going to struggle. So.
Yep. No, those are great. Those are great points. What is, when you talk about turning the fly over, what does that look like, and what does it look like when you're not turning the fly over? Can you describe that? And I'm not sure if that where in the stroke that comes from to make sure you get that right, but can you talk about that, how to do that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, turning the fly over means your leader, your sink tip, whatever, is all laying out nice and straight.
Yep.
And I mean, then, to me, that's what identifies a good any fly cast, single hander or double hand and spey cast, is the fly line turns over and the fly is the furthest out thing where it lands, and the line lands relatively taut, and obviously certain presentations we want some slack in there introduced on purpose, but we won't get into that.
How does that affect when you do a perfect spey cast? It lays out there perfectly versus maybe somebody who casts and they kind of pile it up or it's not great, but then they do a big mend to get it in before it's kind of in that zone. Is there a big difference between? I mean, obviously there's a big difference, but as far as fishing wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting the fly turning over nice and taut means it's fishing right away. The fly and your line were to land in a pile. We don't really know what that fly is doing. I mean, it might be 3/4 of the way before you're through your swing before the leaders actually come taut and is fishing with our chosen technique properly. So turning the fly over is just, I mean, it's all about, just like the casting, it's, the swung fly method is eliminating variables. So we want the cast to turn over at a consistent angle across the river, lay out nice and straight, fish across, and then we move downriver and we want it to do the same. So when these things are changing, you're missing spots out there. Like if one cast turns over taut and swings, and then the next you move downriver and the next cast lands in a pile, you've missed a chunk of the river in there. And once or twice might be okay, but when that's happening consistently as you're fishing over the course of a day or longer, you're missing too many spots. And when a fish that's as rare as a steelhead, you might miss the only fish that was in there and willing to bite. You missed it on that cast that didn't turn over. So
yep, and your buddy hooks up with it behind you.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just trying to cover as much water as effectively as possible.
Yeah, that's perfect. What about, can you describe, you've mentioned a little bit on the forward stroke, but can you just describe a little more detail on doing that correctly and how that starts and ends?
Sure. The forward cast on your spey cast with a 2-hand rod. To me, you're using both your hands, but your top hand is guiding the rod down your target line, which is shown by your anchor. So if you're looking at your anchor on the water, it should be pointing at your target, and your forward cast should go down that line. And so your top hand's going to guide the rod down that, while your bottom hand's going to power it. So a smooth pull of the bottom hand, your top hand guiding the tip down that line. There's obviously a lot more you can add into it. That's the basics of it.
Perfect. So you've been in the Spey-O-Rama, and I think you've been ranking pretty well. Can you talk a little bit about what that event's like, and maybe your experience there?
Oh yeah. It's a world championship of spey casting. It's hosted down at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. Well, I'll tell you, a little story. I think it was 2012 was the first year I went down there, and I'd been practicing a lot. I thought I was pretty good at spey casting, and I show up there, get off a plane and take a cab and pull up at this place. And for the golfers there listening, it's kind of like Augusta National to me. And there's like the rhododendrons and like azaleas are flowering in April when we're there. It's like the Masters. It's just a surreal scene. These huge eucalyptus trees and this angler's lodge with all this like fly history, and the club's been there forever, and so it's a really neat setting. And I show up my first year, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, I can do this, and you walk over this little hill past the angler's lodge to the casting ponds, and my jaw just dropped. It's fun. Like the timing of me doing this was pretty incredible, in that by far the best spey caster at least in recent times, if not ever, Jared Downey from Ireland was in the pond casting, and I just see these lines just, just shooting out over this pond, and like you can hear them, like the speed at which they're coming off the rod. And I just look and I'm like, I am so outmatched being here. And so, once you get over that shock factor where you're like, I shouldn't even step foot out there and try this, like I'm way out of my league. But the cool thing with Speyorama is that everybody is so welcoming, and everybody started like that, and people are helpful, and nobody judges you if you're not on the level of Jared Downey, because none of us are. So I made it through that first year being terrified of embarrassing myself, and came back for more punishment, and over quite a few years got a little better at each year, and there was quite a few years of disappointment, and finally started to achieve at least some of my goals for down there. And the event's gotten a lot of like you'd read on internet forums and stuff like that at times, why would anybody want to do that? It's casting, not fishing and stuff. Nothing's ever taken my casting in a fishing situation further than competing in Speyorama. And when you learn to cast 150 foot, 100 foot, or 120 foot becomes easy, and turning the fly over becomes easy. And so the whole like idea of the event, I mean, it helped tremendously on the fishing standpoint as well. So just a cool place. I think obviously this year didn't happen because of COVID, but last year, I want to say it was 14 different countries were represented there. So you meet a lot of neat people as well.
Sounds like it's a pretty amazing thing. I mean, just, and Jared Downey, what is it? What is the thing with him? I mean, I always think of, you use the golf analogy, which I think is great, because I think of, a couple of things. I think of like like golf's the same way, right? When you try to kill the ball, it goes haywire and it never goes well.
Yeah.
Same with casting. But also when I think of golf, I think of Tiger Woods for me, just because when I was into golf, Tiger was this bigger than life, right? He was the best. Like,
oh yeah.
Is Jared Downey the same thing? Like he just started when he was like 1 year old with a Spey rod, and that's why he's so good? Or why is it that guy dominates?
I do think he grew up, I believe, on the might have to fact check me, but I believe it was the River Moy in Ireland. And I do believe he grew up on the river. This is a stretch for fact wise, but I want to say like his dad or somebody in his family was a ghillie, and he was at a time, but isn't now, I don't believe.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the River Moy in Ireland, I think, is where he grew up. But I don't know what it is about that made him so good, other than when he casts, he looks the most effortless out of anybody, and it goes the farthest.
Yeah.
So he's the smoothest, and it goes the farthest. So he's like the Ernie Els golf swing. It was like just smooth. Never looks like he's trying hard.
That's right. And what is the distance wise? Is there a record, or what do you at the Speyorama right now? I'm not sure how all the competition works, but is there like a certain record right now on longest cast?
Yeah, Travis Johnson has the longest single cast, 198 feet. And Jared has the record for 4 cast. I want to say it's like 732 feet or something like that. So we measure 4 casts. You get 12 casts. There's you have a left shoulder cast and a right shoulder cast, essentially simulating each side of the river. So what everybody does is a left hand up and a right hand up single spey, and then a left hand up and a right hand up snake roll. And you get 3 attempts at each one, and you take your longest of each one. So total of the 4 cast is what's measured.
Mm-hmm.
So Jared's got the record for the men's open, 730 some feet, I think, for the 4 cast. Whitney Gold holds the women's record, and I should know who Martin Keeley, also of Ireland, holds the seniors record. So there's 3 divisions: men's open, senior, and women.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool. And it sounds like an event that no matter who you are, or if you could make it, it would be a cool event to attend just to watch.
Yeah, awesome event to show up and watch. I mean, the Golden Gate. Have you been to the Golden Gate angling?
I haven't. No.
I mean, for anybody who's in San Francisco for any reason, it's just, regardless of it, if Spey-O-Rama's happening, it's such a cool place to visit. I mean, the lodge is like a little angling museum, and the ponds and everything. It's really neat. You can show up and cast fly rods, get in the pond any time of year, cast single-hander, or get in with waders and cast spey rods.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool.
Really cool place with a lot of angling history. So
nice. Well, maybe I can get a guest. I'm not sure who would be a good person, but I could follow up with something there to dig more into the casting club. I know that name, obviously it's come up quite a few times over the years, but hey, let's dig back into, you mentioned your home water. It was kind of, if you talk steelhead, it's kind of the Clearwater, and I know it's been struggling, and I think it was even closed here the last couple of years, but can you just take us to the it was. Can you take us to the Clearwater and talk about, how you catch steelhead there, just saying a typical year, and I'm not sure if it's different from any other rivers?
Yeah, I think, it is. The Clearwater is essentially, the Clearwater and the Snake here are the biggest steelhead rivers in terms of volume and width that we have, certainly in the lower 48. These are summer steelhead coming up the Snake, and we're typically fishing for them in the fall. And so floating lines, because of the size of the river, you encounter larger spey rods than you typically find on other rivers. So while you and plenty of people do fish your typical 13-foot 7-weight spey rod, the Clearwater, you'll run into more 15, 16, and longer foot rods than anywhere else.
That's right.
And it's been a cool place for me to grow myself as an angler and a caster. It's a place where truly distance can play a role. You can catch a fish 30 feet offshore for sure, but there are many of these runs in particular with other anglers and stuff fishing them where, being able to reach out further plays a big role.
Mm-hmm.
So between that and Spey-O-Rama, it's a neat way to grow as a caster. And then beyond that, the Clearwater fish are large and extremely surface oriented. So you never need a sink tip on the Clearwater River if you don't want to. And you can catch them on a dry fly, on a wake dry fly. Or, your typical fly is a smaller than average, drab little hairwing or classic steelhead fly. So smaller flies than are typical on a lot of places. And yeah.
Like just kind of like 8s and 10s sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean you can catch them on a bigger fly, a size 2 or whatever, but I would say a 6 or an 8 is your typical fly for typical conditions. And I always like to fly with less flash, and I think like rivers like the Deschutes and stuff like that, you'll see a little more flash in your flies than you would on the Clearwater. So
Gotcha. And is it more kind of just early mornings, evenings, or are you fishing all day long with the dry line?
All day.
Oh, you are all day long. That's cool.
Yeah, and if you get into the differences with different rivers and stuff, the Clearwater, the sun is at the fish's back. Other than like mid-morning, the sun is at their back. so they're not looking into the sun.
No.
And so it's always been a river that fishes really well all day long.
That's awesome.
And even, I mean, some of the best fishing can be, 1 in the afternoon in bright sun and heat. And yeah, no need to go to the sink tip.
That's
You
cool.
see people doing it, but
Yeah.
I don't, for people who fish there regularly, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who felt they needed a sink tip.
That's perfect. And it's a lot of, like you said, traditional. And it's kind of funny. I think Stephen Bird might even have mentioned it, but a lot of guys even wearing traditional like gear out there, right? The tweed hats. Is there any truth to that?
I don't know. I might have to disagree with Steve on that.
There you go.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure you can find somebody wearing anything if you want, but no. It's no, I mean, what's unique about the Clearwater, I think, is this distance casting scene. Pretty much everybody from the U.S. and Canada who routinely competes at Spey-O-Rama can be found on the Clearwater in the fall. So you'll see some of the best casting in the world driving up and down Highway 12.
Gotcha.
So there's a cool scene of that, just like each of the famous steelhead rivers have their own unique scene and everything. The Clearwater's got it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's and including like Klaus Freemore, right? He's been you've guided him on that river, correct?
Guided for him.
Oh, guided for him. Oh, right. Because that's right.
Klaus owned the permit, Clearwater Steelhead Syndicate, that I guided for. Up until my exit from guiding. But yeah, and Klaus, Klaus is unique, being the Euro in the bunch and the Scandi caster and stuff. So not the big long line, long rod guy. Klaus always stuck with his 13-foot rod and Scandi line, and
of
course did well for himself. Was a great angler and caster. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had him on recently as well, and we had a great conversation about that. So, okay.
Yeah, I listened to go to it. That was a good talk. I enjoyed it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I definitely, there's some of that, the underhand casting and just a different take, but obviously, Loop is a huge company. I mean, what are the lines? So when you talk about, can you just describe you mentioned 15 foot and longer. Can you talk about the rod and lines that you're typically using for those traditional, the stuff you're doing there?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a bunch of companies that make great equipment, so I don't like to push people one way or another.
What if somebody was just gonna? I mean, where would you direct them? So somebody, you got the Snap T and all the shorter stuff and the OPST, right? All this stuff, but if somebody wanted to. And it sounds like there is a little bit of an evolution, right, after in your Spey life. I'm not quite there yet, back to the old school. But if you were evolving back, where would you send somebody as far as what gear to get for that?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I like a couple of rod manufacturers that have been great to me, like Miser fly rods and Bruce and Walker fly rods. Bruce and Walker's company that out of the UK that the competition gear.
Right.
We've got a North American distributor, Gene Oswald, who's just a really, really all-time great person, and so he's the guy on Bruce and Walker rods and in North America, and they're just like the Misers too. Bob Miser, just incredible human being. So. I like those guys, and they both make great fly rods. And the cool thing about the Spey and two-hand world is we have these like niche manufacturers and custom gear, So you're talking with the guy who makes the fly rod or, designed it like that, which is really neat. Cool. So for the long rods, certainly I like that stuff. But of course, you don't have to spend as much money as a custom rod comes in. There's so many great companies that have been good to me, good to swing the fly.
Yeah.
I've often said that if I were to quit working altogether and just become a fish bum again in my life, I'd just sell everything and buy Echo fly rods for a really good price.
That's right.
Like
that's right. I know.
Get everything you basket from Echo for and save a lot of money and be able to live cheap too. So
Yeah, love Echo. So do you have sponsors on the magazine?
yeah, the Swing the Fly has you know, a fair number of companies who've been really good to me. So I mentioned them there: the Miser, the Bruce and Walker, the Echo. They've been great. In terms of custom Spey reels, Farlex reels. I mean, those guys have been with me and supported it since the start.
Yeah. What about lines?
Then,
what about lines?
yeah, I mean, you know, the longer lines are more of a niche thing. You know, there's not a lot. Gale Force Fly Fishing has made. I mean, they've made, you know, the top competition line for a long time, and then, you know, because of that, their fishing lines are really good as well.
Gotcha.
Ballistic Fly Lines is another one that comes from E. Davison, who's also Speyorama contributor.
Yep.
And the shorter stuff, Airflow and Scientific Anglers have been great to me as well, and I think make great lines. They're more shorter lines, though, and I do everything in my own space machine. It's not just long line stuff. But certainly there's still more options out there for the short lines, but the long lines are more and more becoming available. So Bruce and Walker, Gene Oswald, he's making a line now, Boss Fly Lines. But those Gale Force, I mean, it's really hard to go wrong with Gale Force for the longer stuff.
Perfect. Well, Zach, we're gonna wrap this up pretty quick. I just had a couple more I wanted to ask you here, and one comes from Ryan Christian, who's a new kind of in our Facebook group, and he was asking about, and this is one that's comes up, right? It's always a common question, but you know, finding fish and reading water. So if we take it to the Clearwater, you know, you're new. I just run out there here this fall, and you know, maybe I come up in a good year, right, when there's some more fish. But you know, how are you reading the water there and finding fish if you're new to it?
That is a good question. Other than the obvious, to look where other anglers are fishing.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you look when you figure steelhead. I think it helps to think like a steelhead. I mean, you're talking a migratory fish. You know, so they like the path of least resistance, and then they need security from predators. So, you know, if you can find softer current, which the Clearwater has in excess of. It's a lower gradient river through a lot of it, but softer water where the fish isn't expending too much energy, and then security in the form of structure, rocks, large rocks, ledges, stuff like that. The water I avoid is water that's, you know, small cobble, pea gravel, of all the same uniform size, not a lot of variation in bottom contour. So yeah, you find that darker water with some big boulders and the right speed of current, and you'll probably find fish. The Clearwater is a crazy river. I mean, it's a cool river in that it can take it. You couldn't fish it all in a lifetime, and you know, 2 runs can look equal and one can hold a lot more fish than another. But steelhead, you can find them anywhere at the right time, and so things will surprise you too. So, you know, as a new steelhead angler, I would recommend covering as much water efficiently as possible, so you're not rushing from spot to spot, but, you know, take a cast, move. On a summer steelhead river with warm water, I would refrain from the, you know, moving, as we always talk about, moving 2 steps between casts. I would make that 4 steps on the Clearwater and cover more pieces of water if it were me. And, you know, so don't spend all day in one run and throw all your eggs in one basket. You know, the more runs you can cover in a day, while still having fun and not racing around.
So you're
but yeah,
so you're covering maybe an hour per run or something like that, more in that range.
Yeah, I mean, the Clearwater has huge runs, so some of them you can spend 2-3 hours on, and depending on your personality, you know. But covering covering more small runs is not a bad strategy.
Mm-hmm. Are guys, is this more of a kind of drive to hop out fish, more drift boats, stuff like that? What's that look like?
It is. I mean, you can run a jet sled, you can float, but it also has Highway 12 bordering the entire thing with tons of pullouts and a lot of other stretches of road on the other side of the river as well. So there's a ton of walk and wade access.
Are there any sections where you can actually get completely away from roads and have access to good water?
There aren't really
Oh, no
on
kidding.
the Clearwater. No, the highway does the entire length.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So wilderness experience. It is not per se. Although I think the scenery is great on the Clearwater, and standing in that clear water is you can easily forget about the highway, but it is there the whole way. So
there you go. Yeah,
it's not an overnight, multi-day float river like the Deschutes or the Grand Ronde or something.
That's cool. Yeah, I had a Frank Amato on in a while back, and he was talking about the Deschutes. I talk obviously a lot about the Deschutes, but he was saying how he was involved back in, I think it was the 70s, when they were planning on cutting a road through that lower 25 miles, and he was a big part back with the stuff he was doing to help get the word out to protect it. And now it's a roadless. I mean, there's no cars down there, and it definitely makes a difference. It's interesting that obviously all rivers are different, but that's kind of cool.
Well, and we owe a debt of gratitude to people like that who work to keep those places that way for us. So.
Yep, for sure.
While I love the Clearwater as much or more than any river, I certainly appreciate the roadless wilderness stuff. So always liked spending my time. I'd guide on the Grand Ronde overnight trips here fall, in between the Clearwater, and always appreciate the chance to get away from the roads and stuff like that.
That's it. Yeah, I wish we had another hour to talk about the Grand Ronde, but let's wrap it out here with the 222, which is just top 2 tips, flies, and resources. And if we keep it on the Clearwater, do you have a couple of nice, kind of, if we wanted to look up a couple of flies that you love using out there?
Yeah. I'll give you a couple, I guess. The green ant was always my favorite.
Cool.
Kind of sentimental thing as well, but that's found in Trey Combs steelhead fly fishing. The pattern can be found in there. It's just a simple little hair wing. And if I was going to just pick one other fly for there, it'd be some sort of dark hair wing. The night dancer was a Frank Amato fly that Trey loved. So that's not a bad choice. I've caught a bunch of Clearwater fish on that fly as well, but a darker hair wing. But well-rounded for the Clearwater would have some sort of dry fly, October caddis type muddler or something, and maybe a Lady Caroline in a little bigger size, and you'd be set with 3 or 4 flies. You'd never have to change. I mean, if you were to pull out my guide box, pretty much those 4 flies, there'd be 30 of each of them and nothing else.
There you go. All right. Perfect. And what about tips? If we're talking, let's keep it on the Spey casting. Any other, if you want to throw out a couple of tips?
Sure. If I had one Spey casting tip, it would be to keep your eye on your anchor. I'd call it the anchor, the golf ball, or the baseball. So where your line is anchored to the water, if you watch that, it'll tell you everything you need to know about the cast, from the timing to the direction to anything else. So don't watch your target or anything. Keep your eye on the line that's on the water there.
Perfect. And then so you got that set up. So after you have the anchor and you're heading to the second part of the cast, what any other tips there as you're kind of going to that forward part of it?
Be smooth. Keep the line moving, and just be nice and smooth with it. Don't try to hammer it.
Yep.
So, hitting it hard is not going to create better results in any circumstance. circumstance. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
that's right.
yeah.
And then, obviously Swing the Fly is a good resource. Any other couple resources that maybe aren't your own stuff that people could, help them out with spey or swinging flies?
Oh, when I was getting started, Spey pages had so
Mm.
much nice info. If I wanted one resource though for all of this, I would buy Trey Combs' old Steelhead Fly Fish, the 1991 hardcover version. From the history of the sport to the technique of swinging a fly to the classic fly patterns. I mean, you could learn everything you needed to know outside of there's not much on the casting, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's still relevant. And to me, it's certainly the best book. There's been some other good ones, but it's the book on the subject.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, I wouldn't Swing the Fly wouldn't exist, and I wouldn't be here doing this without that book. So
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, no, that's obviously Trey is huge influence on all of us. Well, let's see. I guess that's about. I definitely wanted. We didn't touch on the Backcountry Journal, which is another group.
oh yeah,
I mean, you're connected to. I hear a lot about them.
full-time job.
Yeah. Did you want to maybe we'll hit that up if we get you on down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, the nonprofit, and Backcountry Journal is the full-time gig now. So
Yeah.
working on conservation stuff, which is rewarding. But
There you go.
yeah.
So you're taking it. I mean, that's a cool thing. Is there the connection between, it seems like, fly fishing, the backcountry, everything you got there, seems like they're pretty closely, well, not aligned, but obviously conservation. Are there a lot of similarities between the two niches?
Yeah, I mean, between steelhead and stuff like that and backcountry, I don't know. I mean, wild places and wild creatures, to me,
Yeah.
even though we're just talking about the Clearwater having a road along it, the steelhead is the epitome of a wild creature when you look at its life. And I don't know, I've kind of centered my life around wild places and wild creatures. So I love, wilderness and roadless areas and stuff like that. And I love interacting with wild steelhead, but wild creatures like elk and deer and stuff like that too. So I think that's the connection for me personally is just being closer to nature.
That's it. Did you ever know when you started, say 2012, I can't remember where we were at there, but was backcountry, was this ever even a thought in your mind as far as the job that you have now?
Oh, no. I mean, when I started Swing the Fly, I never would have known that my career path was going to lead to magazines and editing and stuff like that. And I probably became aware of backcountry hunters and anglers in like 2015, leading up to 2016 election when public lands were forefront, and a couple people started wanting to sell off public lands, and I saw this group, working to organize against that and having an impact on preventing that from happening. And so I said, these people are doing something that I really like. And so, no, it's crazy though, the twists and turns life takes. I never would have known I'd be here.
No, that's awesome. All right, Zach. Well, I could talk to you for a few more hours, but I'll let you get out of here. I guess in the next few months or the rest of this year, obviously COVID's crazy, but anything from Swing the Fly, what's the next issue that's coming out?
Next issue should be out towards the end of this month.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Got another really strong lineup. I feel like Swing the Fly is something that I mean, my goal has been to improve every issue, but at times, I mean, I've just continually been impressed by the writers and them continuing to up their game, the writers, the photography, stuff like that. It's not my doing. They do a great job of being creative and coming up with neat new things. So
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I got new one coming out in a few weeks, and then a fall issue to round out the year will be out probably end of October, beginning of November.
Perfect. All right. And if people want to support you and get the magazine, just swingthefly.com.
Yep, swingthefly.com.
All right, Zach. Hey, thanks for taking the time. We've dug into a little bit of everything, and that's how I like to roll here. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing all the stories and tips and everything.
Yeah, enjoyed chatting with you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good.
So there you go. If you want to find all of the show notes and all the links and stuff we talked about today, just head over to wetflyswing.com/151. I created this show for you. I'd love to hear how I'm doing and if there's a way I can make it better. If you head over to wetflyswing.com/members, that's MEMBERS, and sign up for our private Mighty Network. This is the group we have going where you can ask questions and take things a little bit further, and it's a private group in there. So be great to connect with you. If you're in there, just say hi. This is a great place that we're all moving the conversation forward. Thanks again today for stopping by, just checking out the show. Looking forward to talking to you soon and maybe seeing you online or on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.